Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for coming to our community meeting. It's been a while. It's been like 3 years, I think, close to, since we've held one of these, and so we're going to ramp these back up. My commitment is we're going to be doing these at least twice a year, and if there is something more pressing that we need to meet the community on, we'll schedule those as well, in addition to all the other events that we do. So we've got a great presentation for you tonight. We want to provide some information, and I'm really excited about tonight because it's mostly good news. How about anybody here really ready for some good news? Yeah. So it's mostly good news. A lot of hard work being done. And then information about our crisis responder team, which I think is a huge investment that the city's making. And then the most important part is getting to your questions and what is it that's going on? What are you concerned about that we may not know about? I can almost predict everybody's issues just in case anybody's wondering, but we still want to hear them. And what's really important is I'm going to introduce my staff and our elected officials that are here. As you know, because I see some veterans in the room that have been to several of these, the important part about tonight is connecting with the people that do the work that can actually help you with your problems. Knowing who to call is a really big deal. It cuts through. You can always call me. And as Commander O'Reilly will tell you, he'd prefer you called him first than call me. You can always call me, but knowing who can get you the help fastest is really important. So that's an investment you've made to come here, and we're going to return that investment. So with that, let me get some introductions out of the way. I'm going to get to my staff, but let's start with some of our dignitaries in the room. And man, I hope I don't miss any. I will start with our honorable mayor. Mayor Dana Ralph is here tonight. We have Council Member Brenda Fincher in the back here tonight. Going. And we have Council Member Zandria Michaud in the back here today. Okay. So very good. I don't think I missed any other dignitaries maybe. All right, with that, I'm going to have my staff go ahead and self-introduce. Before that, I want to thank the production team. We have our multimedia team here who's been here apparently since like 4 o'clock setting up to make sure this goes. They do a phenomenal job, and I want to thank them for their work ahead of time. And then we'll go around the room. We'll start with Assistant Chief Stansfield.
I'm Matt Stansfield. I'm the newest of the 3 assistant chiefs. Got promoted a couple months ago, and I'm in charge of the Support Services Division.
And I'm Eric Hemmen, Assistant Chief of the Investigations Division.
I'm Jared Kasner. I'm the Assistant Chief over Patrol.
I'm Jason Bishop. I'm the commander of A-Side Patrol.
Hi, I'm Mike O'Reilly. I'm a commander with the Community Services Unit, which is made up of the Neighborhood Response Team, our Special Operations Unit, and Co-Responder Program, and Community Education Unit. There we go.
And I'm Sergeant Andy Kelso. I'm the Special Operations Unit and Co-Responder Sergeant.
Officer Eric Steffes, Neighborhood Response Team.
Stacy Judd, Community Education for the East Hill.
Jaylee King, Chief Padilla's assistant.
Hello, Sarah Wood. I'm the other Community Education Coordinator assigned to the Valley and the West Hill.
Excellent. And I did miss one important introduction. We have our City Administrator, Pat Fitzpatrick, is in the back there. And then how about our VIPs? We'll finish it out with our VIPs, and then we'll get in the presentation.
Jennifer Becker Covert. I'm a volunteer.
Jim Herner, I'm also a volunteer, and we're really looking for more volunteers.
And I'm also a volunteer. My name is Marcy Lycum. Thank you.
She's undercover today, so thank you, Les. All right, without further ado, it's a beautiful day. We're going to get into the presentation and we'll get rolling. We'll start with Assistant Chief Stansfield.
So we're going to do a presentation tonight on staffing. And staffing is going to cover a few different things tonight. We're going to talk somewhat about our successes that we've had, because we've had a lot of success lately. Our team's been doing a really good job in that regard. But we do have some challenges, and then we have some plans that we're going to talk about. So kind of past, where we've been, and then we're going to talk, like I said, about what we see as our challenges, and then our plans. So when we do this, if you have any questions, go ahead and just raise your hand. If I need to clarify something, I will. Or if you just want to hold it to the end, that's fine too. So. Okay, so when we talk about where we were, we're not going to do a big history lesson here. We're going to talk back to about the 2017-2018 period, right up until 2020. Something happened in 2020 that kind of changed things for us a little bit. So there are some numbers that wouldn't have made sense in that context, but when we talk about the past, we're really going to talk about that 4 or so year window, 2017 to 2020. And then where we are now is literally kind of 2022 into 2023. And then where we need to go is going to be a timeline, but also more priority focused without timelines, because we don't know 100% on some of that stuff. So in 2018, we look back here and there's a couple things that I want to show you. So a really common thing where police departments get compared is how many officers they have per 1,000 people. It's a really common metric. It's been in the news a bit lately because of some legislation that was in Olympia in this last session. But it's something that we kind of use to say, how big are we? Because it's pretty easy to say, hey, you have X number of officers and you have X number of citizens, and then what can, you can make your own correlation there. You tend to see bigger departments, that number is bigger, just as this graph kind of shows. Now, this is back in the 2018 to 2020 time, and Seattle was up there at about 1.9 officers. You're going to see in later slides, they've actually dropped as well. But we use this to kind of show, because everything takes time, and the decisions that we made back then are impacting what we do today, just as the ones we make today will impact the future. And so back then when we were doing staffing analysis, we were much smaller than we are now in actual officers, but our authorized strength was the same as it is today, right around 160. We're down there at the bottom at 1.24 officers per 1,000 people. So you can see where Kent kind of falls in there, and the cities that are kind of around us. Now, on the right side there, what we have is what we call part 1 crimes per officer in the 2018. Now, these numbers come from the FBI off numbers that we report to them. Part 1 crimes tend to be our more violent crimes and felonies. And the interesting thing that we have here is this is the number of Part 1 crimes per officer. So not that every officer has 44.79 Part 1 crimes to investigate, but again, it's just a corollary thing. So what you can see from there is in 2018, we had a really low number of officers per 1,000 people for our comparables. But as we compare the type of crimes and the most serious crimes that we would want and you would want investigated, we had a lot for our officers to do. So that's where we're kind of painting that picture back in that 3 to 4 year window. Okay, so when we look back at that window, these are our authorized staffing. Now, back in 2018 and even today, even though we were authorized 157 officers, in 2018, I don't think we were ever above about 120 actual officers hired, right? Today, we fixed part of that number in that we are in 2023 and we have 166 authorized, but we have hired. We're right up right now, probably around 162, 163, depending on the day. We have normal attrition, but we're at we've really closed that gap. The problem is that tells you that we've hired 40-ish some people that are all brand new in that timeline. The other thing, what we want to show here that I want to demonstrate is in 2018, the council and mayor had authorized us up to 157, and they continued their support every year, adding in 2019, 160. And then in 2020, we went up to 165, but that thing happened that we'll just call the pandemic, right? And that made us change the landscape a little bit. We had some really hard budgetary decisions to make, and we in the police department had to do the same belt tightening that a lot of the rest of the government had to do. And what we ended up doing was we froze 5 of our sworn officer positions. We eliminated some of our civilian staff positions completely. And we went down to what we would say is 160 authorized as the most we could hire to. In about 2020, we were still floating right around the 130 of the 160 were filled with police officers. In 2021, we maintained that. And then as the pandemic unwound, we kind of figured out exactly what was happening into 2022. We unfroze those 5 positions and then added Sergeant Kelso's position in the co-responder. That was something that was authorized in the 2022 budget, and he's been brought on to fill that role. And Commander O'Reilly will talk in depth about what the co-responder team is in the next presentation. But what we're seeing here now, though, is we're at 166 into 2023 and 100 and 2024. So what we also know in that same time frame, what do we think the population probably did, right? It expanded. Okay, so This kind of paints where we're at today, that we've grown. If we look at this over the course of the last 5 years, total growth of about, or I'm sorry, 7 years, about a growth of about 5% or 9 positions in the last 7 years. That's about 0.7% growth, or officer and a quarter every year. The population has grown and outstripped that growth quite a bit. So we're going to talk about kind of some of the plans we think might work to fix that. So one of the things that we did do that was never done before in the past is probably about 3 months ago, we actually got to 166 of 166 authorized positions hired. That had never happened. And that was through some awesome work, some really innovative things. We took a look at our entire hiring process. Again, really good support, because a lot of the things that we had to use to adjust that hiring process use resources, money, and as I said, the council and the mayor have been really supportive of providing those resources as much as we can, in the form of things like we did some really innovative things like looking at other agencies' tenured investigators and allowing them to be, if they met the qualifications, they could be hired on and go directly into our investigations unit. That's nobody in the region's doing anything like that. We also took a look at, rather than just doing the hiring bonuses for lateral officers, which gets kind of into a game of you're only first for a second, and then somebody comes along right behind you and says, well, you're at 10,000, we'll be at 12, and then we'll be at 17. And pretty soon you can't stay on top of that. And so what we looked at is what else is valuable to officers, but it's also valuable to us. And we look at the leave banks of officers that are at other agencies, and we were able to get it where if you have vacation or sick leave that you've kept at another agency and you have a certain amount, up to 200 hours of each can come with you, and we will fund those banks here. And what we thought, and we know from that, is if you have an employee that's at another organization and they have high leave banks, that means they're coming to work. Right? That's the kind of people we want to have come to Kent. We want our officers to come, and they're going to be reliable employees. They were reliable there. They'll probably be reliable here. So that was another thing, really innovative. We do these things, and then we watch our peer agencies struggle and scramble, and hey, they call us, how'd you do that? We're not telling you, but we did it. And so, so those are some of the things that we've done. We did up our lateral incentive to $25,000. We're still one of the agencies around here. They're starting to offer entry-level incentives. We haven't been doing that yet. We've been able to keep our entry-level pool strong. We've changed a lot of our outreach of who we go talk to when we look for police officers. And we've changed the makeup of our recruiting team significantly. So again, a lot of support from the council and mayor. We had some hopes for the 2023 legislative session. There was some possible reallocation of sales tax money that we thought might help with increasing, and the proposals kind of centered around like a 0.1% of existing sales tax would be held back and be given directly to the cities, and that it only could be used to hire police officers unless the agency already had the national average of police officers, which is about 2.6 per thousand, which would make the Kent Police Department a lot bigger than it is. That didn't end up going through the legislature, but that's where we are. But the bottom line is what we did is we had our, go ahead, you have a question, sir? National, yeah. Washington is still very, very low. I can't remember what Washington is. It's less than 1.5. It's the lowest in the nation of officers per 1,000 people. So, but we did put in a ton of work. Our recruiting team was all over the state, into other states as well. We've sent them all over, and they've gone out there, started a really good relationship. One of the really neat things that they've done, and they've continued this even though we're closer to full staffing, is doing things like we tied off with the Washington State University has a police cadet program, and we go over there and we help them run their training and mock scenes they have for their cadet program, which are all students. Well, lo and behold, some of those students graduate and then they want to be police officers, and that's a great channel for us. And then just the word of mouth that creates has been really beneficial for us. So that's some of the stuff we've done to overcome some of our historical staffing challenges, and I'm really happy to say we've kept that. We're right up against 166 all the time, to the point now where we have a lateral interview tomorrow, and we can be really selective, right? We can say we only have a few vacancies left. Is this person that's sitting in front of us today the very best person? Because we've really made it a point to maintain our standards as we've tried to do this. So we have hired 40 new officers in about a 15-month window. Upwards of 25% of those are from diverse backgrounds. or underrepresented backgrounds. We've hired 7 police officers. That's 7 more than we'd hired in like prior 4 years before that. And hiring police officers is only one part of it. We do have to take those 40 and make them into police officers, and that takes about a year. It's a 12-month onboarding process. We haven't changed our standards, but we have taken a look at how much time we invest in people. And it is a calculation, because the longer you have them, the more time you have in them. That means the more money. But we really try to look at the whole person and say, hey, if we gave this person 3 or 4 more weeks, would that get us this person that will likely be with us 10 or 20 years? And so that 3 or 4 weeks really it's just a drop in the bucket at that point. And it makes us really sure if we, in the unfortunate event, we have to let somebody go, we're doing it and we know 100% that was the right decision. There was a time back in 2017 and 2018 where our attrition in our onboarding, we had a point there where we let go 13 or 14 people that we had hired in that window. And that's really, really hard to stay on top of numbers like this when we're doing stuff like that. So we had some work to do, and we did it. And I'm really happy to say it's working so far, and we're getting officers. These officers that we've hired 12 and 14 and 15 months ago are now getting on their own. They're filling staffing spots, and they're allowing us to staff other units and do other things that we've been not able to do. So more about where we are right now. These are pretty accurate numbers. I'll tell you, it's really hard to get this because this changes so much. Every agency and every city is trying to do a little bit different things, but you can kind of look here. And in this one, we go into some of the smaller agencies as well, like Tukwila. But they're close by. Des Moines, obviously, a neighbor of ours. And we looked at some of the bigger agencies like Tacoma, in Seattle here. You can see this versus the other slide. Seattle's smaller today than it was back in the 2018 to 2020 range. We have some notes there on the side, like Federal Way, they were able to add 13 officers. Their city council added 13 officers. That's a big deal for them when you think that's almost 10% of their force. But they're in the same boat we are, where they're behind the state and well behind the national average. It's funny, I was at a conference for our body-worn camera vendor in Arizona, and I met a lieutenant from a police department in Joliet, Illinois. Anybody know where Joliet, Illinois is at? Right, it's a suburb of Chicago. Well, population-wise, Joliet and Kent are pretty close. I want to say Joliet's like 158,000 people. We're close. They're a little bit bigger. They have like 350 police officers in Joliet, Illinois, right? And I know Chicago gets a reputation as a violent city, but if you just look at, and it's not 100% apples to apples, but even if I'm counting apples and oranges, that's a big disparity, right? So regionally, though, we're still, even if we're at 166 here with our 137,900 people we've counted, we're at about 1.20 officers per 1,000 people. So any questions? That I've kind of covered a lot of math stuff, sir?
So you were saying that we are the lowest in the state as far as police officers per 1,000 people?
No, Kent, we're the lowest. The state of Washington is the lowest in the country, yes, of states.
So is that because we are able to find quality people for the fill of position, or they're just not available?
It's a combination of both, in that Washington, for whatever reason, has just not ever had police forces that were very large in comparison to their population. And then a lot of those police forces are understaffed, right? So you kind of have a double-edged sword there. It cuts both ways, so that you don't have that many officers allocated, like you can only hire so many. And that's kind of what we're talking about now. For a long time, we had a problem. Hey, we just needed to hire people, whether we were 155 or 160, we only had 110 or 120. We don't need to gripe really too much about the size of the police department until we can at least fill that. Well, now we've filled it, and we still know we're too small because we still can't do these things. And we're trying to provide that service that we can that way.
Just a little more context to your question, though. I have numbers from the state board, the Washington Association of Sheriffs. Washington has the distinction of being last in the country for 8 years in a row. So long before the pandemic. And so when you see the trend is that deep, that means the investment from our state has been that low for a long time.
Sir.
So looking at those cities up there, I don't recognize any of them as contract cities with the sheriff's office. Freetown, Covington.
Right.
So I don't recognize any of those cities up there as contract cities. Like SeaTac,
Yeah, SeaTac,
I think,
Covington, right.
or Covington. How do the contract cities stack up per 1,000 population?
They're similar. They're similar now since they're,
Because I know they've had problems.
yes.
They've got the money, and the sheriff's office hasn't been able to provide the officers.
Right, and I can't speak 100% to that.
I can.
Okay, and so, but I do know that contract cities in general have the same struggles. If we talk to an officer from Covington or Berrien, they're in the same boat we are. I don't know that for a fact. No, try to focus. Counties are so, when you start doing contract cities and you start blending, trying to do any look at the numbers from a county versus a city, so many other things come into play, because like the county has to provide so many different services that cities don't, and vice versa, right? There's things city police departments are mandated to do. Like the county, they have to account for, they have to do civil eviction processes. The cities don't have to do that. And so all those numbers and how they can use those deputies versus officers is so different. It gets really hard to do the apples to apples that we try to stay as clean as we can on that to keep the data right. So, but I do know if I ask a sheriff's deputy, whether they're in Covington or Berrien, they will tell us that they're short-staffed as well, and they're mandating their people to work long hours and all those things. So I would have to think that the numbers are similar. So any other questions on kind of the data we're talking about? Okay. So we want to talk a little bit about where we need to go. So as I said, we've done a good job of elevating our diversity to this point. We want to continue to do that. And now we've done some things other than just saying it. We have some actual tangible programs in place that we think are going to help that. That means we're going to have some new faces that are from some new places. We're seeing that. Like I said, we're getting people from much more diverse backgrounds into our processes. And that's really not changing how we hire per se, or like any of the standards. The standards are all the same. The aptitude scores, our background tests are as stringent as ever. We still do all those steps that we do. It's who we're going to talk to and saying, hey, do you want to be a cop? Right? That's what's making the difference. Hey, do you want to be a cop? Have you thought of this? Do you want to serve people? This is a career you can do this. Do you want to make a difference? And that's that new focus, and that's why it's had some new outcomes, right? And we're seeing that, so we want to continue that. So having a robust effort as we go forward. There's a lot of internal debate we do. We're full right now. That's what we kind of feel like we're full. We have this 160 some officers, and we have this recruiting team that's doing backgrounds and hiring. We're like, well, those officers could go work the street. But what we know is if we collapse them and don't have them do this really good work and keep us as full as they can be and ferret out these really good candidates, that what we run the risk of is when we want to grow, we're going to have to stand all that infrastructure back up. And that took us better than a year really to build a lot of the programs that we're using today to have the success. So we're building a culture of quality and adaptability. We changed our mission statement, and these are two of the things that made it in there that I'm really proud of, and I'm really happy we included. But we know that we need to provide quality service, and we need to be adaptable, right? Police need to be adaptable to meet the needs of the community. One of the ways that we're doing that is through our CLIP program, and that's Community Inversion and Law Enforcement Program. And what this does is it pairs new officers when they're hired, before they hit the academy, into a community-based organization. And we have a couple different ones now. We just started with our second community-based organization, Vine Maple. I think it's up here on the East Hill. And the officers work directly, the new officers work directly with the community-based organization, doing whatever community-based work they do. Some of our officers that worked in the first iterations of this had the opportunity to work with World Relief, and they settled a ton of Afghan refugees that were coming out of Afghanistan as we evacuated our military forces from that country. And we had a lot of people that had helped us, and so we got to help people that had helped America for a long time. And our police officers got to do that as their first exposure as a police officer. That's what they're going to do. They're going out there and they're working, helping these people get settled in the community, everything from taking them around to appointments. And everybody knows how easy government processes are to navigate when you need something like a driver's license or a social security card, right? So we're trying to help them get through those things, right? By having somebody there that is an American citizen that maybe never had to go through that. But we think the empathy that creates of seeing the challenges that those people from another background, clearly from halfway around the world, and helping them navigate that can help give them a little perspective of somebody they might serve later on the street. And that's the basis for that program. And that's been supported. Again, all that stuff takes funding and money to pull that stuff off. And we're really proud. The University of Washington studied our CLIP program, had a whole bunch of really good things to say why it needs to be continued. There's legislative efforts to keep it underway. We're continuing it regardless of that. We think it's a value to our new officers and our community overall. So we also aligned our DEI, our Diversion, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, Officer Doherty. He's directly in line with our onboarding and training programs, and he spends almost as much time as anybody else with our new recruits, working them through what I call our Kent version of DEI, because it's real. It's based on Officer Doherty's and others' experiences and how they apply to DEI, rather than a canned version that we could pull off the shelf from somewhere. It's something that we developed on our own, and that's included in that. And we have, like I said, when we talked about our field training and onboarding, we have developed some specific ways that we train that do give new officers maybe a little bit more time and training. One of the things it's interesting, the police officers go to a 720-hour academy. They come out, they go into field training. It's about 4.5 months long, and then we send them on their way. And some would call that an apprenticeship, but you're looking really, our onboarding, even with CLIP, is like a year. And I used to be a mechanic, and I'll tell you, you don't want the one-year mechanic working on your car. Like, just don't want that. And what we can't lose, though, is we're going to have to send one-year officers to help the community. So we can't have that disparity, because if I can't have a thing like a plumber or mechanic, think of the technical things that the police officer might have to do. So we know that if we spend a little bit more time in that training and maybe make that field training a little bit longer, but maintain the same standards, that over the long term it'll pay off, both in our retention, but also the capabilities of the officers that we're letting go solo. Solo is just the word we use for when somebody goes on their own. So our direction for 2023, we have 4 department-wide goals, and these were set back, I think in January we set these. First goal, we want to integrate all our new people. We want to get them into the organization. We integrate new people at the bottom. That means we're also integrating specialty positions like detectives or neighborhood response officers, or even promotions out. All those people have to be integrated into their new job, or fill in a job that we maybe filled 10 years ago, but we're just filling it again for the first time in a while. We're elevating our effectiveness in serving and protecting the community. That's always ongoing. We develop a wellness plan for employees. We think of employee wellness as crucial. We know that police work is hard on people's bodies and sometimes minds. And so we're doing a lot of things to be leaning forward. We have a counselor that's integrated into our patrol squads that does regular visits with the officers or confidential. We have a workout room and a new lunchroom facility, so the officers have a place to come in and shed their gear, either do training or just work out for a minute to take their mind off whatever, or just to stay fit and strong, because that's really important for what we do. So a lot of wellness related efforts. We have wellness instructors that are coaches that are trained in different techniques to help people, so officers don't get injured as they're trying to work out, and they're doing the things that are most effective to keep them healthy. So those are some of those things. And then what we're looking at that's underway right now, that we're hoping to have ready by the end of this year, is developing our strategic staffing plan that's going to take us from 2024 to 2029. And that is going to be really heavy on how we look at staffing the police department going forward. And there's a couple different ways that we think that's going to happen. So we know that we've identified 3 paths to growth. If we want to grow the police department from 166 and 30 odd civilian people to around a 200 person organization, there's 3 paths to do that. You have state legislative funding, which is kind of what I talked about before, where the state legislator says, in some way, form or fashion, says, hey, Kent PD or municipalities, whatever, you get some funding from this. They allocate some sales tax. They allocate the funding just outright. That hasn't happened for us yet. The other way is through a ballot initiative. We ask the community, hey, are you willing to fund more police officers? And that can come in various ways. It's property tax levies, it's sales tax increases. There's lots of different ways. And then lastly, city council legislation, which is what we had for years and years. And that's how I was hired, is that every year that council was adding between 3 and 5 positions every year. The first 2 of those are obviously bigger pots of money because it's more people. The council can do it, but they also have the whole city to run with the money that they have and that they're taking in. So while they can be really diligent and dedicate money and funds, and the mayor's supportive of that, they do have to balance the city budget at the end end of the day, and that is only so big. And so of these three, we really looked at the first two are the most realistic to get to that growth that we're going to talk about here. So if we think about how much growth there would be, we really want to target our growth to a minimum would be a 1.4 to 1.5 officers per 1,000 people. That would make the Kent Police Department about 195 to 205 officers. If we do that through purely council growth, you can see how long that would take. If we're adding 5 officers per year and you want to add 40, that means just let me know because I'll be retired when that happens, right? And you can tell me when we get to that 205 number. So we know that's a lot of officers to add in that manner, right? We also know that increase of 30 or 40 officers will also require an increase in civilian and support staff because we can't just add police officers to the street because we have to, in some cases, take people to our correctional facility and there has to be somebody there. And I'll tell you right now, the correction facility is staffed just as thinly as the police department is. Our record staff, the people that maybe if you go in and need a case report or something like that, the number of people that work in that office there, if those of you that have been to the police department, the same number of people work there was when I was hired in 2008. And right now they're actually short a couple of that. So we know that we're going to have to increase that civilian staff by 20 to 25 personnel at minimum. So the increase of support staff is really necessary for those 30 to 40 officers to be effective. There's just a lot of back end behind the scenes things. That's the people that I work with every day that I'm super proud of. They make it all work, and I can't see growing the sworn officers without giving them the support they need. So that's about how big we think we need to get. So with that, I don't really have anything else on staffing. It's kind of laid out, like I said. That's where we are. Those are some of the numbers that we talk about. We talk about these numbers internally a lot, or anybody that'll listen to us. So thanks for listening. But if you have any questions about kind of the why or anything else, I'd be happy to try to entertain them or get an answer for you. Yep.
Are there national standards for staffing?
I mean, there's recommendations. I mean, they would, not a standard that you can point to. Federal standards, national standards for law enforcement are actually few and far between.
I'm not thinking so much of a statutory or administrative rule standard, but just best practices standards from police administration associations or something like that. And if so, how do we compare it? Because I've heard those referenced before, and these seem like a move up, but like there's still a lot of work to do, maybe even above 205.
There is, and I think we're being modest in those asks. I don't think if you were to ask, if we're at a national average of 2.6, that's what the FBI would say we're at, or the International Chiefs of Police Association would say we're at 2.6. They would recommend 2.6 as the bare minimum. I mean, they would. Now, like I said, there's obviously not a statute you can tie that to or anything, but those would be considered the best practices. I have a hard time saying when we're a whole officer below the national average that could ever be considered a best practice. Even to get us to our 1.4 or 1.5, that would be pretty thin. We think it's a pretty modest ask in numbers, but we also are very aware of the price tag of that because that is not free. So, any other questions? Chief, did you have anything?
No, there isn't any recognized national standard, which would somebody with a PhD could probably figure that out. But one of the things I like to just point out, the two main metrics you can look at that are recognized are officer per capita, and then you could look at calls for service and volume of work, right? I will tell you, Kent PD can demonstrate huge need regardless of what metric you use, right? If you look back to that 2018 metric, we were almost twice the emergency calls of most of the departments on that list, and bottom on staffing. So the good news is we hire really good people. I think you guys get to see our staff. They're phenomenal and they make it work. And the support we get with equipment and training, we band it together, right? So we're maximizing what we have. What the AC didn't say, or assistant chief didn't say, was at 1.5, that puts us at the average of the comparables in Washington. So we really aren't asking for the moon and stars. We're really asking just to be in the middle. So it is a modest ask. Questions? Very nice job. Thank you. All right, our next presentation. If we can have Commander Mike O'Reilly. Are you doing the intro? You could, no, go ahead. Assistant Chief Kessner, you got it. Dueling mics.
Thank you, Chief Padilla. Thank you, Assistant Chief Stansfield. During this, you got question cards. If you need more and you're thinking of questions, just write them down. We'll have another opportunity at the end to answer any questions. Next up is Commander Mike O'Reilly, who will be talking about co-responder program. Same thing, I can hand out more cards for you if you just raise your hand if you have any questions during that. Here's Commander Mike O'Reilly.
Thank you. Thanks you for all of you guys coming out here. It really says a lot about you and wanting to be involved and finding out what's going on with your police department. And so we really appreciate the partnership. As I said, I'm the commander of our Community Services Unit, which is the new co-responder program. Our Special Operations Unit, which is really a combo part of that program, and then our Neighborhood Response Team and our Community Education Unit. Now, the Neighborhood Response Team and our co-responder program and our Special Operations Unit. By the way, Special Operations Unit's a high-speed way of saying bike and boat unit. And they deal with a lot of homeless activity and things like that. And so you can see with Neighborhood Response Team and the Special Operations Mission that it's very overlapping at times. And so we've done a reorganization that really put those two units under the same roof. And it's made us a lot more effective, I think. And we've got big plans as we move forward and we start to grow both those teams back to their original size. So we identified a need to have a co-responder program. That's obviously been a national trend. Most police departments across the nation are and have been and still are trying to build one together. So it's a very competitive process. Obviously, just like I wrote here, our officers were dealing with people in crisis, but maybe not necessarily even committing crime to begin with, right? And so people weren't sure what to do. Well, I don't know what to do. I can see this person's having a really bad day. They're ranting and raving, walking up and down the block, but who do I call? And so it's 911 and you get an officer who we want investigating crime and responding to 911 emergency calls, right? And so there was a real challenge. And so what are some things that can happen there, right? It's a drain on police resources, right? So you have an officer who's trying to de-escalate with somebody. And I'm sure you all know that de-escalation takes time and patience, often more than one officer that are tied up on these calls for long periods of time. Meanwhile, people are still calling 911 and we have priority one calls coming through. Obviously, you can see some of the benefits here of starting up a co-responder program. Like I told you, it frees up officers for emergencies. This connects people with people who are trained and have college degrees with all the letters after their names, right? To help them. I make connections early. A big part of this isn't just waiting for them in crisis on that day one. Maybe they're starting to trend that way. Oftentimes people just don't show up one day and they're in crisis on the street ranting and raving, right? There's a slow progression sometimes. And so we try to be very proactive with our program, as you'll see, in making contacts with people early and developing relationships. So if they do escalate, they already will know the team of officers and our co-responders. And then continued follow-up. It's routinely following up with somebody. So maybe you helped them on a bad day. That just doesn't end it. Maybe it solved the problem that day, right? But we want to sort of holistically solve the entire problem. So some of the challenges that we faced early on with Sergeant Kelso and I, recruiting, like I told you, is very competitive. Pretty much every police department across America is trying to put together one of these programs. There's obviously logistics, there's training, bringing on somebody who probably has had no first responder experience into sort of that hornet's nest of what we do on a daily basis and responding to people in crisis and things like this. And obviously there's a significant amount of time involved in that. So came to the realization we had a team that's been established right in our backyard that we work with on a daily basis already. And so we partnered with our Puget Sound Regional Fire Authority CARES unit. This is an established team. They started 9 years ago. They work side by side with the fire department and us. We've already been calling them. They're trained in our radio procedures, communicating with us and responding on calls. Our officers are already familiar with them. And it's really seemed like a match made, and they were looking to grow their program. And so we got in early on with their team to really tailor it towards our needs. So staffing and availability. So right now, we currently have teams in Kent, Renton, Tukwila, and SeaTac. They do. But we have a contract with them, right? So that means we have a Kent team that's on duty for us. Now, let's say we already have our Kent Cares team tied up with somebody having a bad day down at Town Square Plaza Park. And then we have something else pop up, maybe up on the East Hill at 108th and 240th or something like that. If nothing's going on in Renton or with one of those other teams, then we can take that team over. And so it's quite helpful. They currently are working 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. They currently have 8 registered nurses, and we just hired, I would say we because we're co-responding, we're cooperative together, 6 social workers. They just hired 2 more. And we want to be at 8 RNs and 8 social workers around that August, September timeframe. And the cool thing about this hiring process is Sergeant Kelso and I have had the opportunity to help train them as they come on board and help participate in their selection process. So we get a real good idea of the type of people that are coming in. And it's great because first responder, the fire department are looking for people that are going to be able to do the same kind of work that we do, right? End of year projections, we're looking to bring on 1 other team, so we'd have 10 and 10. That's the goal. Registered nurse, the scope of practice. They can do medical assessments, clinical withdrawal for alcohol, opiates, non-EMS wound care. Let's talk about that one. So people are in crisis for a number of reasons, right? It could be related to drugs. It could be alcohol. It could be somebody that's living outdoors and maybe they had a bout of frostbite or they got a nasty gash on their foot and they got emergency care to begin with. They went up to Valley Medical. They got treated. And because of the lifestyle that they're living, they're outdoors or a number of problems, they weren't able to keep that wound care it's easy for a lot of us, right? You get the paperwork, you go home to your house, you take off the bandage, you clean it off, and you retreat it, and you rebandage yourself. Oftentimes, that's not happening with people who are outdoors and things like that. And that might cause anybody to have an incredibly bad day, right? And so what's cool about the CARES unit, we get out there and we start having a conversation. We realize, hey, the guy's having a bad day because any one of us would, right? Our nurses can just do some non-emergency care right there on the spot, and it might just solve the problem, right? Medication education, pretty simple there. Chronic illness management and education, those are all pretty understandable there. Social worker scope of practice. This picture right here is actually the very first co-responder call that we went on with the police department and the fire CARES unit. A lot of stuff that we do already as police officers, but sometimes having a person who's trained in a background of social work and things like that, de-escalation, suicidal ideation, anxiety attacks, substance abuse disorder, mental health support groups, senior care, APS, CPS, DSHS. A lot of the social workers that we are bringing on through the CARES team have backgrounds in a lot of this stuff. And in fact, it's a good idea not to have everybody cookie cutter with that same social worker background, right? Because if you have people that come with different backgrounds, they can teach and train each other about all the different resources, right? So if you have somebody who has a background with juvenile care, another person that has a background maybe in APS or with CPS, they can all share that information and the resources that they have from their experience before they became part of the CARES team. obviously advocate for housing, basic life needs, and employment. A lot of this stuff we're doing in our special operations unit already on a daily basis in our interaction with homeless people and encampments. And we routinely go out to these encampments with several partners, either somebody from our City of Kent Human Services Department. Now, that doesn't mean human resources like we think about with employee care. These are actually bona fide human services people, and they help coordinate care either through Union Gospel Mission, Catholic Community Services, some type of housing. And we routinely do this already. And so it's really cool to have a full-time team that we have available at our resource. And so we partner with them, hence co-response. So working together. So how do we respond? There's a variety of different ways that we network and interact with our co-responder team, our CARES unit. So one, we can co-respond. Maybe an officer's getting dispatched to one of those calls that I was talking about to begin with, right? They might just say, hey, is CARES available? Just like that. And our dispatchers will say, looks like they are. Hey, can you have them meet me and we'll go together on this call? Because maybe the person's having a bad day and he's amped up, hasn't done anything wrong, but he seems aggressive. And so we should go with them on that, right? We've got our training and things like that and the gear, and they've got the know-how. And so let's go together and we'll do it safely. We also have a situation where we might call it a warm handoff. Hey, we call them out and we usually talk to them before they even get to on scene. We'll call them on their cell. And they'll have an interaction about, hey, this is what's going on. And one of the CARES team might make the assessment, hey, I feel pretty safe about taking over, but can you just hang there until we get there? And then we can kind of talk about it, make a quick assessment. If I'm good, then you can get cleared up and go right to the next call and be available for calls for service. Could be a cold handoff. Maybe you're dealing with Bill Smith, who's a downtown guy that the CARES team is familiar with. They know about the problems because they've talked to him before. Remember that part I talked about the early intervention and making early contacts. Maybe they feel totally comfortable with talking to Bill because they've known him. So they just say, hey, you can clear right now, officer, and get right back in calls for service and responding to the emergency calls for service, right? Directed patrols, and I'll cover a little bit more of that, but that's areas that we're identifying. So let's say it's an area in the downtown, or maybe it's an area where we might have a homeless encampment and there's a lot of activity in that area. We're gonna ask them, hey, when you guys aren't responding to a call for service, we want you to pay attention to that area and be friendly and go out and chat with people. We want you to get to know those people in that area, and we want those people in that area to get familiar with accepting services. Because a lot of times, if you think about it, most families in America, you either have family or friends that have had some sort of bout with addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs. And you think about with a loving, caring group of friends and family trying to get the person that knows he or she's loved, and they still won't accept services, right? It takes a long time even in that environment, right? So this is that same sort of thing. We want them to get comfortable seeing that, because you never know when that person's going to hit that moment when they need that help, right? And they're going to get used to seeing these people and have a familiar face. So referrals and training. So one of the things that we did with our training that I'll cover here first is we had to teach and indoctrinate all of our officers, right, that are on the daily basis. They know, they worked with CARES before, but this is sort of next level stuff that we're working on. And so we had CARES team members come to all of our patrol briefings, come up to the detective's office, the whole 9 yards. And so everybody in the police department got to know these people and understand the mission, how you can ask for help. Obviously, obviously on your radio, you can ask them to come. But let's say you work at night and it's midnight and you're dealing with Bill Smith again, and you can see he's trending and he hasn't had a problem yet, but man, somebody needs to talk to Bill. Maybe he's using 911 a lot right now because of a variety of reasons. Hey, you can do a quick referral. Every one of our officers, that's just the top part of the card, has a card, and it has all these different ways to how you can contact your CARES unit for a referral. The easiest one is the QR code that I've got on there. Literally, they can click on that with their camera, their phone camera, or they can click on a link and it takes them to a quick and easy referral thing, and it's super easy. Name, address, location, maybe there's a related case number, things like that, and boom, you hit the send, and off it goes. And then that goes to the CARES team for their morning breakout session the next day. And so when they have their briefing, which Sergeant Kelso participates in, either personally, side by side, or virtually, but every day he works with them. The cool thing about it is then they have that assignment. They'll go out, they'll make that contact, and if they can, then they're going to follow back up with the officers. So they know, hey, this is what happened. We went out and we talked to Bill. This is what he's got going on. This is what we're working on. If something happens up again the next night, please let me know and remind him that we're working with him and we're to solve his problem. Like I said, daily communication. So Sergeant Kelso works with them. He'll discuss the referral process, anything that came up from the night before or over the weekend. He might be able to pull up the case report from the incident that the officer responded to and give the CARES team a little bit more detail about, hey, this is the whole thing that's going on, right? Because they're just getting a quick glimpse of, hey, here's the basic problem, and then he can share that and communicate, and they can talk about what's the appropriate way of going out and contacting that person, whether it's just, oh, they feel comfortable going out solo, or we'll pair up one of our team members to do it. Again, this is where that neighborhood response team part comes into play here also. Our neighborhood response team tracks problems in areas, right? Whether it's geographically or a person or a type of crime and things like that. If we're having problems in a certain area that we're seeing, then Sergeant Kelso will bring that up with them. Hey, when you guys aren't responding to calls, this is where we want you to go. And then, just like I said, coordinates co-response and assistance. So it could just be them trawling the area to be friendly and making contacts, or it could be us trying to go out and reach out and talk to somebody. And that's it in a nutshell. Any questions?
Yes, I've got one question. With the CARES team going out and working with these individuals, thank you. Going out and working with these individuals, one thing that I would like to be able to do is, if there's going to be a call for assistance, to make sure it gets to the proper location, rather than sending officers out on what may be considered a wild goose chase. Is there a direct way we would be able to get a hold of those, or would we still have to call 911, or would we call like the non-emergency number, whatever that may happen to be?
I guess that just depends.
Yeah, because
really,
right.
Because I think most start as a 911 call.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll start with an officer making contact in the first place. So we'll get there, just like anytime you call 911, we'll find our way to the correct location, and then it's the officer that will make the assessment and then the referral regardless. So that's how they'll get there. I mean, sometimes it can be a challenge, right? Because, hey, Bill Smith, he hangs out in the downtown area, or Bill Smith hangs out near Morrill Meadows Park or something like that. And so we'll go in the area, but that might be where Sergeant Kelso can help out. Maybe we have a prior photo of him. Maybe we can look up prior case reports on him and we know, oh, okay, he's got friends here, or he hangs out there, and we can direct them to the right area.
So I noticed that you have hours from 8 to 8.
Yes.
Is the hope that at some point those would expand?
I'll tell you what, there's a lot of CARES team members that would love to go 24/7. And I think when they first started, they were a 24/7 gig. We literally went live with this February 10th. I believe that's the exact date. So the more it gets used, and the more, in which I try to coach up our officers all the time, especially the officers of the night, use this and make the referrals. So if there is a need, then that's something that we can work with. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How are you measuring the effectiveness of the CARE team as far as what impact are they having with people that are out on the street? Are they getting follow-up care?
So that's one of the things that we talk about. That's our goal, right? Is to, once we get them working with them, and this is what we've been doing a long time with just our police officers and working with Catholic Community Services, all these different other resources that we partner with all the time. yeah, that's the intention, is to do follow-up, and it kind of depends on what kind of care are you guiding them towards. Is this something that we can knock out in one day? And they have the time to do that. That's the spirit of this that makes it so great, is they have the time to spend that 2 hours, 3 hours of working with that person to guide them towards that resources to begin with, where, man, we don't want our officers doing that. I mean, we can get them started with that, but we want our officers being available to respond to 911 emergency calls for service. So yeah, that's the goal. And it kind of depends, right? What are the needs? Is it alcohol dependency? Is it mental health treatment? Is it just simply wound care? Is it housing? How can we follow back up with you? Hey, let's exchange information. A lot of people, even if they're homeless, you'll see a lot of them have phones, and they have the ability to be recontacted and things like that. And so they partner with our officers. So if they can't find them the next day, or they're not able to get back in touch with them, they can follow back up with the original referring officer and say, hey, you were the one who was dealing with him. If you see him out on town, have him give me a call, or let me know, see if you can broker a time where we can get together so we can follow back up. And that's the beauty also of identifying these areas where we know a lot of people are at, because we want that contact. The chances of reconnecting with somebody in those areas that we identify is very likely.
So we're going to take some more questions, and we're going to transition. Thank you very much. How about a round of applause for Commander O'Reilly? Nice job, Mike. One of the things I wanted to know was, how are we funding this? And I like to give credit where credit's due. We're funding it because our elected officials, our city council, chose to exercise tax money that existed, $1590, I think is the number, and we retained that money, and as part of that, have dedicated that towards funding the co-responder team. So without encumbering our community with more taxes, leveraged that money and made a really good decision for it. And I know, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to your question, the vision is to get it 24/7. So that could be coming. And so I wanted to give credit to our elected for making that happen. So many of you have written down your questions. Let's do this. If you could just pass them down to that side of each row, our team's going to come by and collect them. This is my favorite part of the thing, because I'll help read the question, or our team will read them, and I get to point to the staff member to put on the point to answer the question. This is my favorite part. You want to help read them since you got the other mic there?
Question number 1. How do you apply as a volunteer? What do volunteers do? And then, are homeless allowed to camp in Kent? So let's just start with the first two. How to apply as a volunteer, and what do volunteers do?
We'll call on Stacy.
All right, I can answer that question. Over here on the table are little cards that have information about our volunteer program, and my email is on the back. So you're welcome to email me and ask for an application. Our volunteers do a number of different things. Disabled parking enforcement. They're able to write tickets to people parked illegally in disabled parking spaces. We have a couple that do non-criminal fingerprinting for like concealed weapons permits, things like that. We do help a lot with community events, traffic control for the runs that happen in the city. There's a graffiti cleanup. There's all kinds of things that they are able to work on. So if you're interested, you can grab one of these cards on the way out and send me an email.
Homeless camping in Kent? Resident expert?
So the super short answer is no. Okay, I'll be done now. So, but there is a little bit of a distinction that needs to be made. So there's two kinds of property: public property and private property. So public property is fairly simple. If you run across a camp in one of our parks or one of our open spaces or something like that, you can just report that to us through 911. You can send me an email, whatever. And and then we'll go out and we'll post that camp. So we have a form that we fill out. If the person is there, we'll try to connect them with the resources. We have these little yellow resource cards that will give them if they are not there, if the tent's vacant, which happens more often than not. They're just not there when we make contact. We'll put a copy of that form there with the tent along with one of those resource cards. And that gives them 48 hours to remove their belongings, and then we'll work with either Public Works or the Parks Department, and sometimes just Officer Chapman and I, and now Officer Ian Lentz. And we'll get those camps cleaned up and removed. The other part is the private property. That can be super simple if it's like the property owner and they're motivated to get rid of those camps. Then we will work with that property owner. Generally speaking, what we do is we'll go to the folks camping there and say, hey, you can't camp here. If you remain here, you're going to be charged with criminal trespass. We'll give them an amount of time to remove their belongings, and that's something that we work with the property owner. And a lot of times it's better for the property owner to give them a day or two to get their belongings and get gone. Once again, we'll try to connect them with resources. We work very closely with a wide variety of organizations, whether it's Catholic Community Services, Union Gospel Mission, Salvation Army, Peer, Kent, a variety, Vine Maple. There's a bunch of them that we work with. So we'll try to connect those folks with the resources, give them the help that they need. But when it comes down to it, no, they can't camp in Kent. So there's a line of a distinction there. We bend over backwards trying to get them pointed in the right direction. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of folks don't really want the help. That's maybe not the best way of saying it. The power of addiction outweighs their desire for help. So that's probably a more appropriate way of saying it. So that's kind of the long-winded answer to that.
Thank you, Sergeant Kelso. All right. There are numerous new photo enforcement cameras at major intersections in Kent. Are those cameras installed and/or active? If not, are there any problems with traffic flow for persons suddenly stopping to avoid a ticket? When will they be active? Some examples of intersections: Kent Kangley, 116th, 256, and 116th.
Yeah, I'll take the question so that way I can make sure I hit all the points. So we have, yes and no. So we have a number of intersections that are already up and running, that have been up and running for, I want to say, over a year now. It's been a few years that we've had some of the red light cameras up and running. But we did just expand that program. That's actually underway right now. So some of the intersections are being built. This one specifically asks about Kent Kangley and 116th. That one is signed but not built yet. So you'll see a sign that says photo enforcement taken, but the intersection is not up and running yet. And 256th and 116th, which I don't think that one is even on the expansion list, if I recall. But without having my list in front of me, I would much prefer to say, hey, let me check my list on that one. We have not seen an increase in collisions at the intersections. We've actually seen quite the opposite trend. There's a decrease in collisions at the intersections, which is the desired goal of these. So they show to be working so far. So.
And just a couple of quick points to that. In terms of how we selected the intersection, it was based on collision data. So we took the top intersections in the city, and that's how we drove it. Also, I'd like to point out, I know the mayor does, this is an opt-in, opt-out tax. If you want to help contribute to these wonderful things called body-worn cameras, please run as many red lights as you want to, because that's what funds them. We appreciate it. These are really, really expensive, and that's what's funding this technology that we think is vital for our community, for us to do our jobs. So thank you.
Thank you, Commander Bishop. All right. Within the last month, health officials have recommended youth carry Narcan to save kids' lives. Will that happen in Kent? Where will youth be able to get Narcan?
Boy, I'd like to throw somebody under the bus on this one. I'll walk through it here unless someone feels a strong desire. My understanding in our training on Narcan is that in most circumstances, when the dose is given, it can't cause more harm than the medical emergency that's already occurring. So that's how we approach it. We train our officers to carry it. We've been carrying it at least 5 years plus. It may be new for some. We've had it a long time with our AEDs and what we call our combat life-saving skills. Our officers are at a very high level trained, and they apply these life-saving skills weekly. We save a lot of people with the fire personnel and EMS. I don't even know where to begin on the conversation of, is it a good idea for kids to give doses? Generally, my reaction is no, but I don't have enough background on that. I'll leave it there. I think the idea behind it is giving the dose won't create a more dangerous situation for the person in medical emergency. That's how people are looking at it. I do get the question from time to time about, Chief, if you're given these doses of Narcan and naloxone, are you just perpetuating the problem? Are you just extending the inevitable? And here's my answer to that. We're in the job of saving lives. And when we get called, we're going to show up and we're going to do everything to save lives. And all of the other, maybe the philosophical or political statements about it, that's not our lane. We're here to save lives.
All right, next question. The Supreme Court decision in the Boise case regulated camping on public property. Did the subsequent Ninth Circuit case from Grants Pass, Oregon, add any new burdens on police besides the Boise requirements?
Maybe. Former city attorney, are you familiar with the case law? I don't want to put you on the spot if you're not. Or Andy, are you familiar?
I'm not super familiar with the Grants Pass through the Ninth Circuit. What I am familiar with is the Boise case. So, and what I can say as far as the city of Kent's take on that, our legal department did a fantastic job rewriting our unlawful camping ordinance. They sent it to Commander O'Reilly and I to kind of review and kind of pick apart and all that kind of stuff. We both read it and I kind of walk over to his desk and I'm like, I'm not really seeing anything wrong. It was probably the best written first draft I've ever seen. They did an excellent job of really laying it out for us. It's an excellent law. I think we are very well legally covered with it. And so I feel very comfortable where we're at with our camping ordinance.
So not to miss the question though, is there, whomever wrote the question, is there some piece we want to share in terms of what happened?
I asked the question because I've read the Boise case and then I heard about this Grants Pass case, and I look around to see what, if anything, new it meant. And I couldn't find anything, and I just wondered if somebody was making it harder for you guys than it already was. Because you got to have a space available to take the person to right at that time, and I didn't know if they added some requirements to that or not that had messed with you guys or not. But so if you haven't seen a difference, then good.
Sometimes case law takes a little time to trickle down.
Yes, so I can tell you that the Grants Pass case came out when we were writing our ordinance. It came out, dropped on us about a week before we were going to council with our ordinance, and we had to make a couple of adjustments. But it doesn't really change the concept that if you don't have housing available, you can't make an arrest. And so we, in our ordinance and in our policies and SOPs, we offer shelter to anybody who is illegally camping. And if we can't get them in shelter that day, we'll walk away and come back the next day. But the other thing we did that's unique to Kent is we wrote into our ordinance that if you're camping in a sensitive area, like a wetland or a park, we might not be able to arrest you for the camping, but you have to get your stuff out of there right now. We're not going to give you warning. We're not going to wait for shelter. But those spaces were, the community made an investment for a particular use, like a park. We can clear that camp out at that time. It doesn't mean that we're going to make an arrest, though. So we did consider it. It came up literally the week before we sent that to council, and we made an adjustment for that.
Thank you. Now that we got the easy ones out of the way, we got to work on the hard ones. All right. Firefighters have to meet standards in full firefighting dress. Do KPD officers practice sprinting in full outfitted gear, etc.? Seems like not being physically or to practice, so when they're physically exhausted after a chase in full gear, it might help with better decision making and skillful implementation of decisions.
Bueller? Sounds like a training department question. The answer is kind of, but probably not enough.
No, thank you for the question. So one of the things, it's often the effort in that regard really comes into our wellness program. We know that to get hired as a police officer, we do have standards. After that, standards are, you have medical standards, or you fit for duty, which are outlined. Those aren't really the physical fitness requirements that we find that really are based around, is the person going to be able to physically make it through the academy and be healthy and not hurt themselves and become a liability to the city and the community at large. So what we found is through our wellness program, and we do have some wellness incentives, they're optional, where police officers can take, and it's varied over the years. We've done lots of different things, and it's incentivized to participate in the wellness program with everything from monetary rewards to time off, things like that. Not that the physical fitness standard gets you that, but it's a component of wellness. You know, having people go to the doctor regularly, get checkups. It's not a singular thing. Physical fitness is only a component of wellness. We've made a giant investment. One of our biggest investments, capital projects that we've had at the police department lately, is our physical fitness and training room at our station. And before that, we outfitted our training center at the East Hill Training Center, and we also took the time to get, I want to say, about 12 of our staff certified as peer fitness coaches, where they can coach staff. Again, none of these things are really centered around a standard of physical fitness, because there's just so many limits that we don't have a way to enforce that based on collective bargaining agreements and civil service rules. But what we can do is encourage it and make it part of our culture. And the chief's really been supportive of that. And it's been supported all the way up, like I said, through these big capital expenditures. And we're really proud of our training and fitness room at the department. It's one of our kind of gems when we walk new potential officers through. Almost universally, they comment like, wow, I can't believe you'd make that kind of investment in the center of your headquarters to do that kind of work. So that shows kind of our commitment to overall wellness, recognizing that physical fitness is a component of that. But no, we don't have a standard. We just want to encourage it and make it part of the culture.
Yeah, and that is spot on. I would add to that something that I have been envious of for years with firefighters is firefighters figured this out decades ago. Firefighters work out on duty. They make sure that fitness and wellness, and it's been decades. And for the same amount of time, police have said, that's your problem. You work out after your 12-hour shift, go ahead and find some time to work out, and don't eat as many donuts as you used to eat, right? I disagree with that. And where we're going as a department, we've built some infrastructure things. Now it's a matter of figuring out the logistics. But our department is going to be a department where being well and having dedicated time for wellness, whatever that looks like, is going to be a part of the work week. That is a part of your job. In Kent, it'll be part of your job to not be as round as I am, kind of, or maybe a little more emotionally stable, or all of the things that we work on that our officers deal with.
Did anybody have any more cards that they filled out while we were answering questions? We're still open. All right. What's happening with intelligence-led policing? Is it still a leading edge initiative? Is it part of the co-responder cares team? My bad. I tried to fake it. It didn't work. I'm sorry. Is it part of the co-responder cares team communication and follow-up? Is it in use in other areas? And if so, where and how?
So this one I'll take because I own the decision on this. When we had to stabilize our staffing, if you guys remember, many of you heard me speak about losing 32% of our uniform force in 1 year. The decisions that you pay me to make are, number one, make sure that when someone calls 911 for an emergency, there's somebody to go. And that we prioritize the most important things that are occurring for law enforcement services, which are, unfortunately, our homicides, our shootings, our violent crime. So we reduced all these units that you see represented today that are getting built back up. And I put everything I had into call response and into investigations of violent crime. That was the bare essence of what we needed to do, and that's what we did. The message I hope you're getting here tonight is we are coming out of that. We're turning the corner. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and we will get back to the preventative patrols and things and the community-based things that will help us get further along. So how does that apply to data-based informed training? That is still a hallmark part of what we should do. Data should drive a lot of our resources in when we go. I muted that. We still collected the data. We still looked at it. We still put resources that we could to the data. We look at it every month. We get a report called our Crime Trends Analysis Report from our crime analysis, Kevin Axelson. But really, it's one of those where we look at it and go, man, we really wish we could put more people to the catalytic converter thefts that are happening down at the lakes. And I really wish I could put some more people, up on the East Hill for some of the racer problems that we're seeing pop up, And so it was kind of one of those, you look at it and you get depressed because you're like, you really wish you had the resources to put to them. But I will assure you, we put everything we had to the violent crime. And a nod to our detectives, which is run by Assistant Chief Hammond, our clearance rate for homicides and shootings is through the roof. We do a really good job. It may take a little while for us to find you, but we do find you and we do bring you to justice. So now if we could get on the preventative side of things, we're working on that. So data-based intelligence-led policing still a thing. You'll see more of that as we go forward. One of the things that's in our staffing plan is to establish a unit that I'm calling the Crime Reduction Unit. That unit will not be assigned to 911 calls, nor will they be assigned to community-driven problems. This will be a wing of the patrol division that will see problem, fix problem. Using the data, whatever the crime problem is, prioritized based on violence first, this unit will move into that area and work the problem, establish community partners and whatever it takes to make the problem better, and they'll be mobilized throughout the city where we need them. So that's a big deal. In terms of CARES, the answer is they do use data. A lot of the data comes in through qualitative data from the referrals, and we'll be looking at that. There was a question about, I think, related to performance metrics. Part of our interlocal agreement with the fire department is that we will get reports, statistical reports, that should help us measure some of the impacts. Because we want to know if we reached 100 people with services, how many of those that were repeat customers that came back, and how many did we actually get elevated and back on their feet. We want to know that. I will say, in all fairness, those are very hard numbers to track because of the transitory nature of the people we're helping, right? Andy, Mike, anything to add on the data part for CARES?
No, other than we're in the very early stages. And one of the metrics that I think Commander O'Reilly touched on a little bit, one of the metrics that we're really trying to focus on in the beginning is getting our patrol officers back out on the street. So our CARES teams, they're suited for being there for 2, 3, 4 hours sometimes, getting folks directed to the right resources, where our patrol guys might be there for 20 minutes rather than 2 hours. So that's one of the metrics that we're really trying to achieve from the very beginning.
Excellent questions. Open forum real quick. I want to be sensitive of our time. We're coming up to 7:30, but is there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I have 3 questions that are sort of pretty minor. Do we still have neighborhood response officers? I've heard them mentioned.
Okay, there's one here.
We have it's been an army of one for, probably 2 years, a year. So we just selected Sergeant Joel Makings who's doing half work in patrol and half work in NRT, and he starts officially on June 1st. And Officer Matt Fisher. Okay, so yeah, so we're growing that team back up right now. For the first time in a long time, Officer Steffes has a future partner coming, should be about June 1st. And then we have Sergeant Joel Makings, who's already doing half and half work, sometimes 60-40, in neighborhood response team right now, but he'll officially start June 1st as well. So we'll be up to 1 sergeant and 2 officers, which is pretty amazing. And by the way, everybody should be clapping for this guy. He did an awesome job all by himself for, and I think December employee of the month, or was that January? Yeah, it's something, January. There you go. So yeah, so that's growing, and same with our special operations unit. We just brought on Officer Ian Lentz, so we're a sergeant and 2 officers. But one of our officers is so good, he's promoting to sergeant on June 1st, and so we've already identified his replacement. So he's going to be starting, Officer Hamilton, in June 1st as well.
Fully staffed, it'll be a sergeant and 4 in that unit. So we used to call it NRT, Response Team. It's NRG, Neighborhood Response Guy, and growing. Your second question.
Okay, some of you in here have police written in letters on your uniform of different colors and different sizes. What's the significance of that?
So for the most part, gold is command. So you have a lot of ranked officers in the room, and when you get promoted in Kent to a certain level above sergeant, you go to gold insignia. Silver is officers and detectives.
Okay, but how about the word police?
They're wearing that second.
Oh, yeah. So you have external carriers, which are utility for those that actually are out and doing the field. I'm an old school guy. I'm wearing an old school pants and shirt. Remember when people used to wear pants and shirt? And I've got the turtle vest underneath. So this is just a traditional versus a utilitarian uniform, utility uniform.
And the size of the markings on the front, I assume you're talking about the police, that varies for just use. The guys have complained that the large one that I'm wearing is in the way of some of their gear. So we've shrunk it down. We're in transition. That's why it's a little different.
So last question, traffic versus traffic.
You stepped out, but go ahead.
So there is one place in particular that I know of where there's a left turn green arrow, and then all of a sudden it turns red, and then it turns flashing yellow when the light going the same way turns green. That seems awfully dangerous to me.
Okay.
Is that on purpose?
I'm happy to report that's a city traffic engineer problem, and we will take that down and report it to them. What's the intersection?
Coming down Veterans Drive.
Coming down Veterans Drive and crossing West Valley.
Okay.
So if you're going to make a left turn onto West Valley from 228th.
Okay. We will make sure they take a look at that.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer, but that cycle is supposed to be that way. So it goes green for the protected turn, turns red to stop everybody, change the lights to go green, and then it goes caution. It's to keep traffic moving. I don't know why it's set up that way and which intersections are. They're not all over.
It's terrible.
It is a little confusing when you first see it. So
I'm getting ready to make a left-hand turn, and I've got a green arrow, and all of a sudden it goes red. What am I supposed to do? Stop. Well,
Yeah, we'll have them take a look at it.
Yeah, I'll get your information and then pass it on to the traffic engineer person to contact you.
Good questions. Any other? Yes, sir.
So since we're on traffic and street stuff, this is a question of a friend of mine's had, and
Sure,
I
a
kinda
friend of
have it
yours
too.
asked.
Yeah, I'm
For a
putting it
friend.
on- I'm gonna throw him under the bus. He asked about the work that's being done on Smith and Central, or if there's work being done on Smith and Central, because some of the roads are really rugged. Maybe it's a street department question, I don't know. And then he also asked about the medium in front of the post office that's causing accidents, or can cause accidents. People are getting backed up in the middle of the street there. So that's 2 questions, I guess.
All right. Everybody, Honorable Mayor Ralph.
So Smith and Central is on our overlay program. That street is really bad. We'll be getting to repaving that in not too long. And then we've got Rapid Ride I-line is going to be coming in over the next couple of years. So you'll see a lot of work coming down Canyon to that intersection and going into the transit center. So it's on the plan. The crosswalk that was put in there on James, we receive grant money from the state of Washington. They analyze where we have pedestrian vehicle crashes. And if you drive on that road at all, you know that we have a lot of people that choose to not use the crosswalk and run across 5 lanes of traffic. So putting that there, the hope is it's going to eliminate the pedestrians that are running, because it's a really long block, right? Coming from Benson all the way up there to the McChevron corner without the ability to cross and the number of pedestrians that are up there. So that's based on feedback that we get from WashDOT, and you'll see those kind of popping up all around the city, and it's just not done yet. So the light poles aren't in and that kind of thing. It'll draw more attention to it. I do have some concerns, and I've talked to our traffic folks about what does it mean for getting in and out of the post office, but it's my understanding they're not putting the drop box back in because, well, it didn't stay operational for very long every time they'd fix it. So you have to actually go into the post office. And so that queuing that was there from that pullout won't be there anymore. And so that's sort of where that landing spot is for pedestrians in that middle section. And my hope is that people realize it's important to cross in a crosswalk and they use it. So
the other thing is about the post office, so I used to use that drop off, but
Me too.
I went there because I know they took it out, so it was late. And I said, well, I thought maybe the post office door is open, and it was locked. So it made it inconvenient for me. But
It's very inconvenient, but I know that they had problems with people staying inside the post office at night and with vandalism. So they've gone to locking their doors. As somebody who has a post office box there, I get it. It's inconvenient for sure. But I think that, and then the post office, just like all other government agencies, is really cutting back on resources. So that's part of that thing. But I've spoken to the postmaster about all of those things. Absolutely.
Oh. Thank you, Mayor. We may be coming back to you. We'll see. Hi, Sandy.
Hi. I do have a question. Once a homeless camp has been identified and turned in, how long is the process to dismantle it?
Yeah, I'll give you a good solid, it depends. So, and it depends on a lot of those factors. We have some right now that, man, I'm itching to get to, but we don't have contracts in place yet through Public Works or the Parks Department. They're working very diligently on getting those things sealed up so we can get those camps removed. But we don't like to go in, post a camp, and then have to go in and repost a camp, and then have to go in and repost a camp, because those things go stale, for lack of a better term, right? So once we know that the Public Works Department or Parks Department has the ability to clean that camp up, we're going to go in, we're going to post those camps, and then we'll get them removed.
Thank you, sir. All righty. I want to be respectful. This was scheduled at 7:30. Some of our team will hang around for anybody that didn't get to ask their question. But I just want to say thank you. This has been an excellent opportunity for us. I'm really glad that we're back. We're going to do this more, and we'll have different presentations, and it will be driven a lot by what we're seeing the community needs are. I want you to stay connected with us. The mayor and I just did a series of videos, which is a recap of the legislative session and some of the wins that we got and some of the losses or non-wins or whatever we did not make progress on, and the fight that continues on. We think it's super important that your voice is represented in Olympia, and so that woman down there lived in Olympia this last session. I did a little bit of my part, as did other people from legal, economic development. But it's important that you be informed, because what comes out in the title of a law or what comes out in a media release and the details of how that's applied and what the impacts are very different. So we want to make sure you're informed. Stay tuned for those videos. And then if you haven't been following, there were some new laws that were passed locally. Very proud of our council and the mayor We are the first city in the state to have a local drug possession law that our officers can enforce. It is a treatment first law where we focus on the ability to connect people with deferral process and deferred prosecution. There are so many safe ways to get help if you comply, and if you finish treatment, it's as though it never happened in terms of your record being expunged. It is about as compassionate as it can be, and so we're very proud of that. I think the mayor would like to add to that.
Just a quick plug. Governor's called the legislature back into special session starting on the 16th to address what we call the Blake decision. If you are so inclined, or you believe that we should have enforceable drug laws that lead people to treatment or provide them with a consequence for not, please reach out to your legislators and talk to them. I have significant concerns that what we will see coming out of the legislature will be a preemption of the law that our council just passed. So that means that the legislature will come in and pass something that is less enforceable, less practical, and then we can't do anything about it. So if you are so inclined, if that is what you believe is the correct thing, or if you believe the opposite and want the legislature to preempt, I've had this conversation last night, so both sides of the story, please reach out to your legislators. They need to hear from you about what's important. They have heard from us a lot this session, but we need to have your voices. So whichever side of the coin you weigh in on, please reach out to them and let them know, because they need to hear what your viewpoint is. So please call them.
All righty. And with that, it's a wrap. Thank you very much.